Hello, and welcome back to the Formal Review. Today, we'll be having a very special episode. Now sit back, maybe grab a drink, and let's talk about this movie.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Formal Review. This is Season 3, Episode 42, and I thank you all for joining me once again. Firstly, let me say happy holidays to everyone, no matter whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, or some other holiday I don't know about. Hope you have a great time celebrating it. I know a lot of people, including myself, won't be able to see their families this year as they normally do because of the pandemic, and I know 2020 has changed a lot of things, but
the night is darkest just before the dawn. I promise you, the dawn is coming.
Keep pushing through. Vaccines are on the horizon and we'll make it out together. Anyway, today's episode is the 10th in the monthly Look Back at History series. In each of these episodes, I, along with a special guest, look back at a very important moment in history. We usually discuss everything that surrounds the importance of that event, along with the film that is connected to the story. It may be the creation of a comic book character, or it may be a significant moment of war, or perhaps something completely different. Each episode will be different. However, listeners will never know when in the month that this episode will drop, the topic, the film, or who will be joining me. The only way is to follow me on social media to see when the newest episode is about to be released, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Since almost every movie-related podcast out there is talking about their favorite holiday movies, I wanted to change up the game a little bit and choose a film that wasn't traditionally holiday-related. Now, today, December 24th, marks a very significant event in history. Well, at least according to legend. So legend has it that Excalibur was taken from the stone on Christmas Eve. So on today's episode, we'll be discussing the 2017 film King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. So we'll be discussing that film along with our favorite King Arthur related movies and our favorite Guy Ritchie films. So stay tuned. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. Like, how do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps that people like to listen on? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every single one of those questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing my podcast. And best of all, it's absolutely 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with some great sponsors. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. Again, that's anchor.fm/start. And I can't wait to hear your podcast. Now, this history episode is slightly different because I will have two guests on with me. One that you have met before, Rye from Life of Films, and a new guest, Andre from Backseat Directors. Now, not only is this the first time that I've had two guests on, these guests also did not know that the other one was going to be on the episode. Like I said, these history episodes are all about the surprise. So let's bring them on now. Andre, Rye, y'all there?
What's going on?
Oh, guys.
Hello.
Surprise, guys.
You're on the same episode.
This is a cheeky surprise. That's funny. How's it going?
It's good, man. Formal, that's pretty tricky, dude. Hey, did he not tell you I was going to be on the podcast?
No. That's funny. Did he not tell you?
No, he didn't say a word. Right, I'm going to do that on my podcast, man. I'm just going to, we'll be recording and I'll be like, hey, so this guy's going to join us. Good one, Formal. Man. Good one.
Now, before we get into anything, I will preface this episode with a slight spoiler warning, as this movie did come out 3 years ago, in case you haven't seen it. I do suggest that you go watch the film first, unless you want something potentially spoiled for you. But if you don't care about that, keep listening. Also, I know I talk about this at the end, but then data shows that most people skip over that part. So I do want to reiterate the importance of leaving reviews on your favorite podcast service, because those reviews really help me grow and improve. A lot of you have talked to me offline, but I do really appreciate the reviews that already are out there. If everyone could just continue doing that, or letting me know any way that you think that I could grow and make this more entertaining, feel free, and I'll look at them and I'll grow as as such. All right, so let's get started. Andre, why don't you introduce yourself since Rye has already been on one episode?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys talked about Dunkirk. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that one. That was a good one, too. Hello, everyone. I am Andre Hutchins, and I am friends with these two hooligans on this show right now. But I'm also the founder of Backseat Directors, and The Formal Review is one of our main contributors for our website. He writes a lot of content for us. And then the other guest that I'm sure will introduce himself in a sec, Ryan, is my co-host for the Backseat Directors podcast. So yeah, that's me, and I'm happy to be here. Formal, thanks for finally having me on. And I'm excited to talk about the movie that we're going to talk about.
All right, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on Formal. I'm looking forward to talking about the film that we're going to talk about today. As some people may remember or have heard me on Andre's podcast, I'm Ryan from Life of Films, do a lot of work with both Formal and Andre and help contribute to their awesome content that they make.
Thanks you both for coming on. I do appreciate it, even though it was a surprise, but I thought it would be a little bit fun to do it this way.
Indeed.
So let's get started here. According to legend, King Arthur was a British leader who led the defense of Britain against the Saxon invaders in the late 5th to early 6th century, and it's basically composed of folklore and literary invention that most historians do agree are somewhat unhistorical. However, there is some basis for this, but it is just very sparse. However, there are also some very key points to almost every single story that involves King Arthur, and one of the most important aspects is the legendary sword called Excalibur. It sometimes has magical powers and is associated with the rightful sovereignty of Britain, but the main thing is that it was inside of a stone and Arthur pulled it out of it, which proved his lineage as the true king of England. So according to Robert de Boron's Merlin, the first tale to ever mention the quote sword in the stone, in 1200 on Christmas Eve, a sword appeared inside an anvil on top of a stone that appeared in a churchyard. In this account, foretold by Merlin, the act could not be performed except by the one true king, meaning that the divinely appointed king or true heir of Uther Pendragon. And that's why we're covering this movie today. So the first question I have for you guys is, why do you like the King Arthur legend?
This is, out of the questions that you sent on the outline, this was probably the most difficult for me to come up with a good answer. Honestly, what is there not to like about it? It's a legend that seems pretty fluid. Obviously, there's many versions and iterations of this legend, but for a legend that, I guess for the region, you know, it being in the UK and stuff like that, and there not being too many legends that have survived history, this being one of them, I think this is one of the most well-known legends throughout the world. And so, I don't know, there's just something about it that I think it has connected with me from a young age. And I might be jumping the gun, Formal, but one of your questions is, how did, we get to know the King Arthur legend? And I think for most people, at least, people within our relative age, it was through the Disney animated movie of The Sword and the Stone. And ever since then, though, I think this idea of this almost like a divine calling through this one of the biggest underdogs from at least this version of the story, who is able to rise above his circumstances and, wield Excalibur. What's there not to like about it? It's just very relatable, and I think a lot of people gravitate towards stories like that.
What about you, Ray?
So I think I really enjoy this story, one, because obviously it's got a lot of English history to it. I quite enjoy that. I like stuff that transcends around the world from British culture. I quite like that, to be honest. I've always been quite fond of knights and kind of medieval-esque films in general, especially stuff that revolve around kind of very knights and dragons. But in regards to something that really captures me from this story is it really pulls on my interest on heroism. As you guys know, and a lot of people who are aware of me, I'm a big fan of superheroes and just those very iconic characters as a whole, and think that King Arthur kind of has that strong story within legend of being this kind of almighty human being who has a level of burden of heroism and stuff like that. He's kind of like the medieval superhero in a way.
Yeah, that's great. So Andre already kind of touched on it as well. When it comes to learning fascinating about it, especially being in the UK. Where did you first learn about it? Because he's right. At least for me, it's definitely the movies and especially the Disney version of The Sword and the Stone. But what about you?
So for me, it would definitely be The Sword and the Stone as well. I remember watching that at a very young age before you ever actually really taught anything of any real substance. Don't get me wrong, obviously, learning how to spell it and stuff like that, substance, but not anything in terms of like history and stuff. And because of the legend around King Arthur, it's not something that's kind of taught in history, from my memory anyway, over here. It's stuff that maybe it's more in kind of your English classes and stuff, and more kind of based around like literature and then actual history lessons, because it's not all factual, is it? Anything like that. I don't know how much of it is actual fact. That's why it's all very much taught over here more in literature lessons and storytelling around the character of King Arthur more than what he did. So that's where he resides massively, from my understanding, in British culture more than his impact on history.
Andre, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think one of the things that I find really fascinating about the legend is how it has transcended, the idea of it, because obviously it's not taught as history. I mean, the historical contexts are very muddy, which is why we have so many different versions of the legend. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into some of the movies. Obviously, a lot of the movies, they try to base it around what they think it could have been, kind of the Roman aspects of the King Arthur legend. But what I find really interesting is how King Arthur has bled over into a lot of other mediums. I know these aren't necessarily good movies, but think about like the last Transformers movie that we got, like that had like the King Arthur legend tied into it.
Arthur, a likely composite of a Roman general and a Celtic king, our dragon. And then we have Merlin, our kingmaker, probably never existed. The question is, why do we tell ourselves these stories, other than the fact that dragons are wicked? It's because we want to believe that we can be heroes in our own lives. When all seems lost, a few brave souls, us, can save everything we've ever known.
It was an actual important part of the story that they were telling for Transformers. And I also know from the Snyder cut of Justice League, I think we're going to get those scenes back to where the King Arthur legend will tie into the story that Zack Snyder is going to tell in his version of Justice League. I don't think we got that in the theatrical cut.
I didn't get that at all.
I could be wrong, but I think they cut that from the theatrical cut. I don't know. It's a story that a lot of storytellers like to play with, and how they like to add it to enhance whatever story that they're trying to tell as well. But yeah, there's something transcendent about the story itself, and that I think most people know. Perhaps, all the fairy tale aspects of the story aren't necessarily grounded in history, but the idea that this legend has existed for as long as it has, it gives way to people to continue to use their imagination and see the world in a different light, I guess.
That makes sense. So what are your favorite King Arthur related movies?
So this is a great question. So I had to do a Google search just to see how many different King Arthur movies there are, and there are way more than I ever thought. And a lot of them listed aren't necessarily specifically on King Arthur. Others here listed are kind of like what I said, have King Arthur kind of added into the story. But one of my top three is going to be the one we're going to discuss today, King Arthur, The Legend of the Sword. I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but I watched this movie a ton when I was younger. But it's the Sean Connery First Night movie from back in 1995.
What I do now, I do for my people and for Camelot, and may they forgive me. This is my last act as your king. I am Arthur of Camelot, and I command you now to fight! Fight! Like the dark party.
The story is more about Lancelot, played by Richard Gere, but King Arthur is obviously a prominent figure in the story. But I really enjoy that movie, or at least I did last time I saw it. And I have to go with the Disney The Sword and the Stone. That one, I guess, for us three right here, that's the movie that introduced us to the legend. And I think for a lot of other people, that's how they were introduced to it too.
Legend is sung of when England was young. The good king had died, and no one could decide who was rightful heir to the throne. It seemed that the land would be torn by war, or saved by a miracle alone. And that miracle appeared in London town. The sword is
can't be understated. But there are some other good ones that I had a hard time keeping out, like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I'm Arthur, King of the Britons. Whose castle is that?
King of the who?
The Britons.
Who are the Britons?
Well, we all are. We are all Britons. And I am your king.
Didn't know we had a king. I didn't vote for you.
You don't vote for kings.
Well, how'd you become king then?
The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water.
Listen, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. Be quiet! Shut up! Ah, now we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up! Help! Help! I'm being repressed! Bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, eh? That's what I'm on about. Do you see him repressing me?
Well, I know that's not necessarily the best depiction, I guess, of King Arthur, but it is King Arthur, so I really like that movie too. So
well, that's funny enough because that's actually one of my top 3.
Oh, there you go.
And then similarly, what you said about Sword in the Stone.
And below the hilt, in letters of gold, were written these words: Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of England.
And then Excalibur from like 81. I think it has a really great cast. Liam Neeson, Patrick Stewart. Anyway, but what about you, Rai?
So for me, I can only kind of really recall ever seeing 3 films, and I wouldn't account Monty Python. I hate Monty Python. Whoa! Monty Python. I hate Monty Python. Actually, that's coming from the British guy over here. I think it's probably maybe the stigma around it here in the UK. It's massive, and it's just like, and a lot of the older generation kind of like it and try to ram it down the younger generation's throat a bit. So it's a bit like, ugh.
Right,
so yeah,
I'm shocked.
I'm shocked as well.
Sorry, guys.
Come on, then. What? Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Just a flesh wound. All right. We'll call it a draw.
So really, I've kind of only really kind of recall ever seeing 3 films, and that's the one we're about to talk about today with third, even though that begrudges me. I have to put it as third as if it's like it's my top 3 favourite iterations of it. Even though it's like, it's not my top 3, it's the only 3. So for me, it's last. And then 2 isn't much better, but it is the Clive Owen iteration of it, which is really, really bad.
Would be good for you to mark my face, Saxon. For the next time you see it, it will be the last thing you see on this earth.
But they try to take some sort of realistic approach, don't they? Mm-hmm. Trying to be more factually driven as much as you can be, but there's no kind of real magic or anything that going on in that. And then, and then my number 1 would be Disney.
So at last the miracle had come to pass in that far-off time, and the glorious reign of King Arthur was begun.
Like I say, it's what introduced me to it, and generally the film, quality of it is good. It's a good children's film, and and I remember really enjoying it. And I think with my Clive Owen one, it does help that Zimmer's score for it is really good as well. So I think maybe if it had a worse score, it probably might have been even worse than what I can remember.
Have you guys seen, I think it came out last year, it's called The Kid Who Would Be King?
No.
I never saw it, but it got raving reviews. Most people had really good things to say about it. Did any of you guys see it?
Was that the kid that was in like school? I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's all about King Arthur.
And it gets all his school kids to like band together.
Their greatest foe was Arthur's own half-sister, Morgana. Convinced she was the rightful heir and desperate to possess Excalibur, she turned to dark sorcery. Arthur fought a fearsome battle against her and bound her into the bowels of the earth, but not before she swore dark vengeance.
When you are long gone, when hearts are hollow and the land is lost and leaderless again, I will return.
And so will the sword.
And yes, it gets all his school kids band together and like fight this kind of...
I've never heard of this.
I never saw it, but I heard it was really good. What about, did you guys ever see the old Disney movie, A Kid in King Arthur's Court?
Yes. Little kid who plays baseball.
Right. I don't even know what...
Ryan, I'm disappointed you haven't seen these movies. I'm happy for him. You've at least seen that one.
Remember 3 things. Lean in, protect your steed, fix a point on your opponent's person, and have at him.
That's 4 things.
What?
Yeah, I remember that one. But going into more specifically into our film here, So, King Arthur Legend of the Sword is a 2017 epic fantasy action adventure film directed by Guy Ritchie, who co-wrote the film with Joby Harold and Lionel Wygram. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. From a story by Harold and also David Dobkin, inspired by the Arthur legend. The film stars Charlie Hunnam as the title character and along with Jude Law, Astrid Burgess Frisbee, Jaimon Ansu, Aidan Gillian, and Eric Bana. So, a little backstory. After 2004's King Arthur somewhat failed, Warner Brothers started making multiple attempts to make a new film based on the legend. There was one that would have been a remake of Excalibur, directed by Bryan Singer of X-Men fame, and the other was called Arthur and Lancelot, which would have starred Kit Harington and Joel Kinnaman in the title roles respectively. However, Warner Brothers were worried that neither names were big enough at the time, though you could probably make that movie now. So they attempted to replace them with more profitable ones before eventually dropping the whole thing together. They then hired Guy Ritchie, who himself attempted to make a King Arthur movie prior to him being hired. In August of 2014, Charlie Hunnam, who was Ritchie's choice for the role, was cast to play King Arthur. Elizabeth Olsen was in talks for the female lead, however, Burgess Frisbee landed the role instead. Jude Law was then brought on to play the lead villain in the film, then Eric Bana was added to the cast to play Uther, the father of King Arthur. So before we go any more into the movie, go first.
Okay, so for me, The Snatch is easily his best film that I really enjoyed, even though not many people enjoyed it the most, but this film kind of introduced me to Guy Ritchie.
Well, do you want to do it?
That depends.
On what?
On you. Hey, this caravan.
Mickey, buying a Tarts Mobile Palace is a little fucking rich. Wasn't calling your mum a tart, I just meant...
Save your breath and curd your parts. Hey, look, so it's a heck of 2 roof lights. The stylish house frame furniture, and the Scotter cushions with matching shark by cover. It's a terrible parcel to the Periwinkle Blue bags. Have I made myself clear, bags?
Yeah, that's perfectly clear, Mickey, yeah.
Doing Guy Ritchie really was Rock and Roller. Even though it kind of didn't perform massively well, it had some big characters in there, Tom Hardy and Idris Elba, that were just first starting off.
What's a rock and roller? It's not about drums, drugs, and hospital drips. There's more there than that, my friend. We all like a bit of the good life. Some the money, some the drugs, the glamour, or the fame. But a rock and roller, oh, he's different. Why? Because a real rock and roller wants the fucking lot.
And those films, and they're huge now, and Mark Strong as well. So I really enjoyed that one. And if we're going to go down more kind of his super Hollywood films, then I like the first Sherlock Holmes. The second one is really bad, but I'm a fan of the first Sherlock Holmes. So overall, I'm a big Guy Ritchie fan. Oh, and I really liked Man from U.N.C.L.E. as well. So I'm a big Guy Ritchie fan.
Head cocked to the left. Partial deafness in ear. First point of attack. 2, throat. Paralyzed vocal cords. Stop screaming.
What are your top 3, Ryan?
So my top 3 would probably be Snatch. I'd probably put Man from U.N.C.L.E. up there over Rock and Roller, to be fair. I'd probably Snatch, Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Sherlock Holmes.
Nice.
What about you, man?
All right, so this was tough. And for Guy Ritchie movies, I think my list is definitely going to be controversial, to say the least, because I know his older movies are considered some of his best, and it's definitely what he made a name for himself in Hollywood with these movies. But obviously Snatch is a phenomenal movie. I love that movie. It barely did not make my top 3. But I don't know. I really enjoy his movies. I love his style. I think he has a lot of flair. I think when a director's movie is able to stand out and they're recognizable just by watching the movie and you know who directed it. I mean, the greatest of great directors have that ability. Anytime you watch a Spielberg movie, you know it's a Spielberg movie. Anytime you watch a Christopher Nolan movie, you know it's Christopher Nolan. And I'm not saying that Guy Ritchie is as good of a director as they are, but his style is so unique and so distinct that he is that recognizable. And so it really was hard for me to choose a top 3, but these are the movies that I rewatch the most. And so I feel like I have to give it to these 3 because I watch these movies at least once a year, if not more. So gotta be King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, Man from U.N.C.L.E., and then the first Sherlock Holmes. Those movies I watch all the time. I love them. I think they're brilliantly acted.
I thought you were going to put Aladdin in there for a second.
Oh, God.
Hey, so I was pretty harsh on Aladdin. Aladdin the first time I saw it, but it's grown on me ever since, even though I do think it's one of his weaker movies. But I think Sherlock Holmes goes unnoticed, which is kind of surprising to me. I think when it came out, it created a lot of buzz. And especially just because this was around the same time that, Robert Downey Jr. was, getting into his Iron Man role. And I really like the second one, right? I was kind of surprised. I mean, I wouldn't say it's nearly as good as the first, but I think it is a good sequel. But that original Sherlock Holmes is so good. It's brilliant. It really is. So yeah, those are my three: Sherlock Holmes, Man from U.N.C.L.E., and then...
So for me, similar to you, Rye, actually.
What about you, Omo?
So I actually really like that one too. I think I saw it after I saw 300 for the first time, so it was like on the Gerald Butler kind of trend. It looked cool, and then I watched it, and then, like you said, a lot of the actors that was starting off there obviously have become big, and I love the style. And then a friend of mine introduced me to Snatch, so that's my number 2. And then basically similarly to whatever you guys said about it, Sherlock Holmes. I really like it a lot. It's very unique. I don't mind the sequel. I don't think it's the most amazing thing in the world, but I like it. And Aladdin, I will say, as much as it's grown on me, I can't view that as a Guy Ritchie movie, because the majority of Guy Ritchie aspects of it is the random slow motion from time to time.
Yeah.
The quick dialogue, the only time I would think of it, it's when Will Smith is doing it, and that seems more Will Smith than it does Guy Ritchie.
It's Guy Ritchie that did a studio film, because for a Guy Ritchie film, it's pretty...
than it does Guy Ritchie.
We have jams. Yam jams, fig jams,
lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp.
Seedless, delicious, exotic jams.
Move away from the jams.
What?
In 10,000 years, I've never been that embarrassed.
It's a Guy Ritchie film, film.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think with Sherlock Holmes 2, I think the big disappointment was the villain, Moriarty. I think for me, he was really, really poor, and I'm not sure I'd be alone with that. And especially in other iterations with him, especially like in the Benedict Cumberbatch show, where Moriarty was just like unbelievably good. He's such a famous villain, and I think he should have been a lot more prominent and a lot bigger than what it was. He was very throwaway. You kind of forget him, where Moriarty, especially in England and stuff, he's massive. He's Sherlock Holmes' rival, and he was built up so much in the first film and the second film. He felt really, really, really flat for me, and I think that's probably where a lot of the issue lies, especially for me anyway.
No, that's fair. I think that I would say definitely the Moriarty on Sherlock is better. It's a different medium, so a different type of thing. Have you watched that show?
Your death is the only thing that's going to call off the killers. I'm certainly not going to do it.
First 10 episodes. I know a lot of people like it, and I know it is a good show. I didn't give it enough attention for it to kind of stick, so I'll probably go back and watch it at some point, though.
Are we on about the same show? Because I think there was only like 10 episodes.
Was there?
You want about the Benedict Cumberbatch? You want about the Benedict Cumberbatch show?
Yeah, I maybe didn't watch that many because I know I didn't get through all of it.
Right, because they were like an hour and a half long, and there was only like 3 episodes a season, and I think there's 4 seasons.
Yeah, and then that one Christmas special.
So I don't think there was that many.
Looks like there are 15 total episodes.
Right, yeah. So it's not that many. So I'd be surprised that you would have got through that many, because they're quite long, lengthy episodes. I think they're like an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, they're like a full movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I binged them pretty much from start to finish. I think I started when season 2 was out, and then I kind of just ran through them.
They are so good. They're up there with me. One of my favourites. I kind of turned my nose up a little bit at Benedict Cumberbatch when that first came out, because I've never... British shows have always been quite... they're a little bit pretentious. They're a little bit low budget. I think American shows are a lot better, and I think Sherlock really changed the game for that over here. I think that was the kind of the real TV series that kind of turned British television on its head a little bit, and I think now a lot of stuff that's now come after that has been quite good. Stuff like Luther and Killing Eve and stuff has been quite big hits and quite high quality, but still with that British feel. So it's kind of a bit of a game changer over here.
Yeah, but let's circle back on too much on Sherlock. Yeah. So when I was preemptive doing some research prior to this episode, I didn't remember that this happened, but apparently when this version of King Arthur came out, they were planning on a cinematic universe. And I mean, we've kind of talked offline like about cinematic universes and how that's an interesting way of progressing with a film. Obviously, this didn't happen, and it failed just as much as the Universal monster movies did, but with potential for 6 films to come out with Lancelot and other people, would you think it would work, or what are your thoughts on that?
I could tell you what Ryan's thoughts are on that. I'm just kidding. So here's the thing about cinematic universes. Ever since Marvel Studios has been able to create the behemoth that they have created, it's what every studio wants to replicate. Why? Because almost every movie they make is like $1 billion box office movie. And studio executives, their eyes light up, with the idea of creating their own cinematic universe, and we're going to have a massive hit on our hands and we're going to be able to sell tons of merchandise, right? And I mean, and everybody wants to be able to do that. And what we have seen over the years is that not every studio can do that. Warner Brothers they've struggled enough already with their biggest franchise, DC Comics. I mean, gosh, that whole thing has been a mess. But this idea that they had committed to making 6 films and that they were going to create this universe, well, if you're going to commit to it, you should commit to it. And I get that the first one was a massive, massive financial flop. It really was. I mean, my guess is they probably lost over $100 million on this movie. They didn't even recoup their production budget, let alone the money that they spent for advertising. So it was a massive, massive financial flop. But over the last few weeks, I looked into this more and more, and just because I think The Lord of the Rings is the gold standard for what a trilogy or series of movies should be and what every studio should aspire to. And I'm not saying that not every movie can be Lord of the Rings, but the way that these movies were produced and the money that was allocated for these movies, it's just not done that way anymore. And it's unfortunate because studios are willing to throw $200+ million at a movie and just watch it fall flat on its face. And I don't think it's good for the industry. And so this movie, I think King Arthur, it had a production budget of $175 million, which is just enormous. I think that's just under what the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy costs to make, because I think each movie was around $92 million to make for Lord of the Rings. Well, I guess that it cost, what they spent on one movie is what they cost 2 Lord of the Rings movies to make. But if you can't make a really good, big budget movie with like $100 million budget, I don't think you should be committing to make a 6 movie series when you have no idea what you're even doing with the first one. As much as I like this movie, I am really disappointed that we're not going to see any more movies from what was planned and what was supposed to be. It's really unfortunate because I thought they set it up very good. And yeah, I don't put the flop of the movie on Guy Ritchie. I don't think that it was his fault. He made the movie that he wanted to make, but I do put it on Warner Brothers for how they handled this movie.
Right, what about you?
So the concept, I don't mind too much. I think I get a bit tired of the people wanting to think that there's this formula that they need to follow to make money, because the formula that Marvel created, in my opinion, was a formula that is go off and do something different, and if you really mean to want to do it well, you'll do it well. And now that everyone's just following them and just copying them, they don't have the drive and intention as what Marvel went in and did it, and that's the reasons why Marvel keeps winning and everyone else keeps failing. So that's my gripe with the overall kind of thing, but I don't think it was a bad idea. There's some legendary characters in there like King Arthur and Lancelot and stuff that people are aware of, some big names. So if they had managed to do it well, it would have been quite an exciting concept, but they didn't. Like I said, I don't like the film. It didn't do very well. It was very successful, so I'm not surprised it didn't happen. But overall, I'm not on board. This is the first time hearing it, and I would have been on board with the concept before I'd seen the film. But after I'd seen the film, whether the film had been successful or not, I'd have been like, I ain't seeing it. I'd wait for it to come out on DVD before I saw the other ones. Let's put it that way.
So why don't we start there? So Rai, what specifically didn't you like about it?
Okay, what did I specifically not like about that film? I think I can give you 2 specifics, which were my main gripes. One is I think that Charlie Hunnam is an awful, awful actor. I think he is so bad. I think that if he wasn't so good looking, I don't think he'd be as famous as he is. And call me shallow, so sorry guys, but he's a good looking guy. And I think that his acting is pretty lousy, and people knew it was lousy. It was awful in Green Street. And it wasn't much better in Pacific Rim. So I don't know how he keeps on getting these opportunities, and the only thing I can suggest is the fact that he looks pretty good in some... You're gonna get your ass kicked. Say that's a good looking guy, and I don't feel like someone that maybe is up there on the upper echelon of that maybe would have got so many opportunities, because he has bombed quite a few times, and this is yet another bomb, but yet he still seems to be knocking about, and there has to be a reason for that. So he's awful in that film. And the visual effects, honestly, I've seen better visual effects on Xbox 360 games. Honestly, some of the fighting in it when he gets the sword and he's taking on loads of people, it just looks so poor. You could barely see what was going on, and when you could see what was going on, you wish that you couldn't, because it was like the detail looks like it was rushed. And so for me, those two massive aspects really threw the film out for me, and I couldn't enjoy it. That's just on top of things like the fact that they were all talking with London Cockney accents, because Guy Ritchie loves that, and I'm not even sure they had those accents back then, but they were all speaking like it, so it was all a bit like, what the... Like, I don't know what's going on here, but that was all very weird. I like Jude Law, but his whole concept of his character and how he turned into this weird super being, which his visual effects of that weird super being was awful. I've got plenty of issues with why that film was pretty awful. So that's my take on it, guys. What's yours?
Dude, you're killing me, Ryan. You are killing me, man. Listen, okay, let me ask you a question. Ryan, do you like Keanu Reeves? Do you like watching Keanu Reeves movies?
I like watching Keanu Reeves, yes.
Charlie Hunnam is the modern day version of Keanu Reeves. All right. He's a good looking guy that maybe isn't the greatest of actors, but I will watch every movie that Charlie Hunnam is in, man. I love that guy.
Keanu Reeves is a better actor than Charlie Hunnam. Formal. Which way do you rest on this? Keanu Reeves isn't the best actor I've ever seen, but he plays Neo perfectly, in my opinion. I don't watch that and go, he's playing that character poorly, where Charlie Hunnam was playing King Arthur awfully. Clive Owen's version of him.
Yeah, Mikey, I think he likes it. How about some more? Oh, yes. I know Kung Fu.
King Arthur was better, and Clive Owen sucks as well.
Right, have you seen...
Hang on, let me formal. Okay, I want to hear what formal. What side does he fall on? Is Keanu Reeves a better actor than Charlie Hunnam?
I have to say that comparably, yes. But Keanu Reeves is not a phenomenal actor.
No, he's not.
Having said that, I will say...
I don't lose! I win! That's my job! That's what I do!
I didn't mind Charlie Hunnam in this, though he was absolute trash in Pacific Rim. He was really bad.
Have you seen Green Street?
I have not.
Oh, man. If you thought he's bad in Pacific, he's better in Pacific Rim. Go watch Green Street and you'll never want to watch a Charlie Hunnam film again.
Right. But the thing with Charlie Hunnam, though, is I feel like he needs a good director. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Guillermo del Toro, but, I mean, it's not like Pacific Rim was a great movie. Look at Idris Elba in that movie. The movie was just a cheese fest. Have any of you guys seen The Gentleman yet? It came out earlier.
Today we face the monsters that are at our door and bring the fight to them. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
Charlie Hunnam's excellent in that movie. And have you seen, it came out in 2016, The Lost City of Z, which stars Charlie Hunnam.
I think you told me about that one.
No, I haven't seen that. I've seen 3 films of his, and I'm not rushing to go back to see it anymore.
I mean, anybody that knows who Charlie Hunnam is, they've likely seen him in Sons of Anarchy. And he's good in Sons of Anarchy. I mean, the show is a brutal show, and I think all the actors do fairly well with the roles that they have. Okay, this is what I'm going to say about Charlie Hunnam in this movie. Charlie Hunnam is the type of actor that Guy Ritchie salivates for because it fits Guy Ritchie's style. It's like Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill's not the greatest of actors. He is by far and away better than Charlie Hunnam. He is, and he can carry a movie. But Charlie Hunnam kind of fits this mold of a debonair, good-looking, strong, masculine British man. And that's what Guy Ritchie goes for. It fits the Guy Ritchie style. And so I think Guy Ritchie and Charlie Hunnam together, for me, really work. So I had no issues with Charlie Hunnam.
So I actually, like I said, I enjoyed him as Arthur, mostly because, I don't know, I saw the passion that he put into the role. If I remember correctly, I think he said something he really wanted to play this part when they were first developing it. I see that in his portrayal, and I thought he was fine. I don't think he's amazing. I mean, it's definitely better than Pacific Rim in my mind. I'm not against him as much as Rye is, that's for sure. But for me, yeah, that wasn't one of my bigger issues with this. But I think similarly, the CGI at times was pretty awful. I think the opening scene, I think, was fine, but then the latter parts just didn't hold up as much. And the mage character that kind of was makeshift Merlin, her delivery of lines was really atrocious. But my main issue is the Guy Ritchie aspect in this film.
Pick it up.
You pick it up.
You want to know why you still can't use it.
Why don't you tell me?
I think you know the answer. You will face it when it's worth it to you.
Stuff that I was talking about, it took me out of the time period that they were in. When you're in like this medieval time, I didn't feel like I was because of the words that they would use and the way it was delivered.
Dialogue.
Yeah, the dialogue just didn't feel like medieval England. I mean, I understand that it's a Guy Ritchie movie, and for a Guy Ritchie movie it worked, but for a King Arthur movie it didn't work as well.
Well, I mean, you guys definitely see eye to eye on that, but that is one of my favorite parts of the movie. Yeah, does it violate everything in terms of historical context about what the UK would have been like back then? Yes, of course it does. Of course they weren't talking like that. I'm not sure any historical movie nails the language and dialogue perfectly, but this
certainly didn't.
No, of course not. But that's the thing, though. But that's, if you know Guy Ritchie and you know his movies, I wouldn't expect anything different. It's like when you see Aladdin, it's kind of jarring because you're like, well, I thought this is a Guy Ritchie movie. Where's the Guy Ritchie stuff? Well, this has all the Guy Ritchie stuff, and it's brilliant, man. I can't. The dialogue is one of the best parts of the movie. It's just so entertaining. I think if there was one word that I have to describe this movie, it is entertaining. Its sheer entertainment value is so high. I mean, it is fast paced from beginning to end. There's hardly any long drawn out scenes or dialogues that are not fast paced and just go, 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 go. I mean, oh my goodness. I love it, man. I love it. I love this movie, and I'm sad that you guys don't.
So if you had to say any negatives, do you have any?
I do, yes, because I think that the CGI is definitely worth criticism. I understand what Guy Ritchie was maybe going for with the type of style that he wanted to use, just trying to accentuate the power of Excalibur and what it would allow King Arthur to do when he wielded Excalibur. But yeah, I mean, it's not good. And the amount of money that they spent on this movie, you would expect something so much more than what we got. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like, you think about the theatrical cut of Justice League. They spent over $300 million on that movie, after reshoots and everything, and trying to CGI out Henry Cavill's mustache. and it looked awful. And everyone knew it. And it's crazy the amount of money that these studios will spend with these effects companies, and the results are so poor. And so, yeah, I mean, the CGI is definitely deserving of criticism. But I think, like a lot of movies today, most movies fail on special effects and CGI than they actually do succeed. I think Star Wars and Marvel are some of the few movies that do succeed at it, where, gosh, a lot of others, you're just kind of scratching your head going, how the heck did they spend so much money just to get this? Mm-hmm. Think of the new Jurassic World movies. Most of those dinosaurs, they're all CGI now, and everybody complains about it because they just don't look as real as the props,
right?
The practical effects. And so, these movies cost way more than the original Jurassic Park, and yet they just don't look as good. But yeah, no, I mean, CGI, that would be my main criticism. The more I've gone back to rewatch it, it feels too short. There's so much going on in the storytelling that I wanted more to what's going on, especially with Vortigern, with his character and how he got so powerful. Obviously, you have those sirens that live in the dungeon of the castle that he's in, that he's making deals with, but there just seems to be a lot of lore that's missing that I thought could have been added. So I'm not sure. Do you guys know what the runtime is, formal, on the movie?
Not offhand.
Too long.
So that 2 hours and 6 minutes with credits, meaning the movie is well under 2 hours.
Right.
It'd be an hour and 50 minutes. It could have done well with another 15 minutes at least. I know you guys don't like this movie. I'm right. I know you're a big critic of this movie, and then many people are. I mean, it didn't get that great of ratings, but I just enjoy this movie so much. It's so rewatchable.
So what are your favorite things about it?
Well, at least this is one thing that I know Ryan and I we agree on. The score is one of the best scores I've ever heard in a movie. Daniel Pemberton created a absolutely brilliant original score for King Arthur. It's rare that a score will enhance a movie as much as this one did. I think you only see that in kind of movies like that have Zimmer. By far and away, that is one. I really connected with the King Arthur character in this. His swagger, his moxie, his confidence, his humble beginnings, not knowing who he was. And I'm glad that Guy Ritchie went in this direction, because I think it's something that a lot of people kind of connect with, the kind of this discovering your identity and then the call to accept your responsibility of who you are, taking on the mantle of who you are destined to be. Even when he finds out who he is, he's reluctant to accept his role and what he knows, what he was born to do. That kind of story, I know it's an oft-told story, but I love it. And I think in this movie, it works really well. So those are some of my favorite things about the movie.
Rye, do you have any?
Yeah. The score is like, I'm up there, Andre. The score is brilliant. It is probably up there, some of the best bit of composed music for a film I've heard outside of Hans Zimmer and Williams, to be honest. I think it was something that I came home and listened to straight away as soon as I came through the door and listened to for a very long time after. So, man, Danny Pemberton has been pretty much hit throughout, to be honest. After that, he's done some really good pieces of work. So that's a really big positive. Kind of liked the concept of the sword in the stone. That whole process of how the sword got into stone, I quite liked that idea. So that was cool. And I liked David Beckham was in it.
Yeah. I rewatched it and I kind of forgot that he was in it, and then he showed up.
All right, where'd you want me? Bouncing on my knee. Where'd you think I want you? Hands on the heel, stupid.
And I was like, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's funny.
No, but I liked the concept of the Sword Stone thing. I thought that was quite clever. And I kind of liked Jude Law. I didn't like him when he turned into that kind of weird, overgrown monster CGI mess thing, but I thought before that he played a villain quite well. He's quite villainous. I thought he seemed quite serious character and portrayed that quite well, especially in the scene, which actually has a really good score behind it, where it's looking like King Arthur's going to be beheaded in front of everyone.
When your head rolls to me, the legend you fast become will just as quickly
Here are your people.
add to the reverence of my name. And for this, I salute you.
That whole scene is actually really good. It's very impactful. So I really enjoyed that part, and Jude Law being a big part in that. He's a brilliant actor, so he's probably the best performing actor in that film, in my opinion. So there are a few bits that I kind of could take with the film.
Yeah, I'll have to third on the score thing. I think it is really good. I also really like Jude Law as well. I think his character was really interesting as a villain. I really thought he did really well, and I really like what his character had to go through in the story, which when it comes to the story, that's another thing I liked, because I kind of didn't expect when I first originally watched it how this film kind of turns into a King Arthur, Guy Ritchie Hamlet in a way, which I didn't think is so much, at least to my knowledge of the King Arthur legend. And so that was really interesting to kind of think of it that way. And then what you said, Andre, about the entertainment, I found myself really entertained by it. The Guy Ritchie aspects, I think it does work a lot of the time in it, even though it's not so much a King Arthur. It doesn't fit King Arthur's, I guess, setting, but it works extremely well for a Guy Ritchie film. I mean, that kind of goes into now, we're obviously a few years from when it was released, talking about how the film holds up. Similar to what you were saying, Andre, about I do think that it could have been a little bit longer still. I will say, I think critics overall panned it. I don't think it's as bad as people think it is, or in this case, as Ride thinks it is. But I think it has good enough aspects to be entertaining. I wouldn't say it's a good movie, though. What about y'all?
Right, you go ahead. I want to end on a good note.
Well, I think I might sound a little bit contradictory here, but I remember saying when we first spoke, Andreas, that I felt saddened that it bombed so badly. Even though I didn't like it, I felt that Guy Ritchie deserved a little bit more than that. He's a good director, and for whatever reason, it just got tanked. And there's films, I think, that have a par quality that have done far better. They got, for example, Godzilla films don't do really well. They did better. Do you know what I mean? I'm a bit shocked by how badly it did do with Guy Ritchie's name attached to it and Jude Law being a part of it and stuff. I thought there was something a bit shady going on back there with how badly it got on. I don't understand it, considering the fact there's so many films out there that make loads of money, like the Transformers films, for example, and they're just absolutely awful, and everyone knows that they're awful, but yet if they released another one today, it'd still probably make $1 billion. So I don't get that. I felt it was sad that happened. I can't say that it still holds up because I didn't ever really enjoy it. Like I said, the visual effects were quite poor then, and now that we've advanced even further, it's going to look even worse now if I was to go back to watch it, and I haven't watched it in a little while, to be honest, so I can't imagine it does hold up very well from that perspective. But overall, for me, it's not a film that I'd see myself going back to anytime soon, sadly.
No, and that's fair. I think that's totally fair. I mean, it's hard for me, if I don't like a movie the first time, it's hard for me to ever consider going back and rewatching it if I didn't like it the first time. So I totally get that. I'm curious what you're alluding to about, you said something fishy going on, because I had heard rumors about how Warner Brothers treated this movie when they anticipated that it was not going to do well financially, kind of like pulling the rug out from under it before it could ever even get going. Is that what you're referring to?
But that I remember reading stuff like that, and then the overall kind of bombardment of bad reviews for it as well seemed disingenuous, and just its overall performance just didn't add up. I saw that film on day one. I was one of the first people to go and see it, and the cinema was empty. I remember going with two other friends, and I think I recall there being like 3 other people in my theatre, and we went on. It was the opening day, which is usually a Friday night. But I remember saying, "Well, are we in the right film?" Like, it was empty, and this just doesn't seem right. It's just a Guy Ritchie film, and Charlie Hunnam is quite famous, and like Jude Law's massive. Like, it just didn't sit right. So I remember reading stuff you said, Andre, a mixture of like overwhelmingly awful reviews and that initial process of no one going to see it for no reason at all really raised my eyebrow of like, this just doesn't sit right with me. Something's not right here.
Yeah. Formal, what was the Rotten Tomatoes score?
So on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 30% rating based on 273 critic reviews for an average score of 8.4 out of 10. Not really sure how that really works out, but the general consensus states, quote, King Arthur Legend of the Sword piles on mounds of modern action flash on an age-old tale and wipes out what made it a classic story in the first place. Based on audience score, it has a 69% after a little under 32,000 user ratings.
Which feels a bit more accurate as to how it was received by those who watched it.
On Metacritic, the film has a 41 out of 100 based on 45 critics indicating, quote, mixed or average reviews.
But yeah, I mean, you can't understate how big of a financial flop this movie was. The amount of money that they spent on this movie compared to what they were able to bring in, it was a massive flop, and it sucks. It really does, because it feels like it maybe made Guy Ritchie kind of go underground a little bit. I'm not sure if he would have ever taken that Aladdin movie, had they continued the sequels. He would have been busy, that's my assumption. And then he kind of got back to his roots with the movie The Gentleman, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was a really good movie. But in terms of rewatchability, how does it hold up? Again, I think I've seen this movie at least 5 times since it exited theaters. I own it. I just bought the 4K version on Black Friday, so I'm looking forward to seeing that in 4K, because before I only had the Blu-ray. For me, it holds up, but yeah, I mean, you guys are fair to criticize the CGI because it's definitely deserving of criticism, but in terms of entertainment value, it's one of the most entertaining movies that came out in 2017, in my opinion.
So going toward the future, when it comes to how you can portray King Arthur as a legend, the majority of the ones that are actually concentrated on King Arthur, they don't do well. Like you mentioned the Clive Owen one, you have this one, they just don't seem to hit audiences. So what do you guys think about where they can take a film that may succeed, or do you let it die and maybe come back in maybe 20 years? And your thoughts on why do you think these movies around this topic don't do too well?
I'll take this one first. So outside of the Disney film, The Sword in the Stone, one of the things that it kind of got me more familiar with the legend was a novel by Mary Stewart. We had to read this in high school. I don't know if you guys did, but it's The Crystal Cave. It's not necessarily about King Arthur. It's more about Merlin and the origins of Merlin and how Merlin gets involved with, the other aspects of the King Arthur legend. I really enjoyed that book. I think that there is a lot of storytelling opportunity within the King Arthur legend. There's a lot of characters, and there's a lot of room for other, filmmakers and storytellers to come in and kind of tell their version. And so it is unfortunate that these movies, and at least the number of movies that have come out, based on King Arthur, haven't succeeded as, the filmmakers had intended and had hoped for. I'm not really sure where they go from here, because there was kind of a big space in between that Clive Owen one. I think there was maybe one other one in between Clive Owen and then this King Arthur one, kind of more of a Roman style. Here it is. I called The Last Legion, but I think that was kind of a King Arthur legend movie, but it was a smaller movie. But I don't know what audiences want to see from a King Arthur story. I don't know what they're hoping for or expecting. I do admit that I'm someone who's easily pleased, and so most movies are entertaining to me, but I'm bummed. I'm bummed that we're not going to see what would have continued from this movie. So, but I am curious, Ryan, since you didn't like this movie, what would you want to see from a King Arthur movie?
Yeah, so I think going down this route of what could they do, I think the King Arthur that we've been speaking about, the Guy Ritchie one that we've been speaking about, I think it's more of an execution issue. I think that the story of an unlikely person, very much like the Disney, he's very small, he's very skinny, he's very poor. That whole story of this very, very unlikely person becoming this greater than life character, that's what the story is about. And I think for me, the execution was poor. It's like you look at someone like Charlie Hunnam and the character, it's just like you can put him in rags as much as you like and stuff, but like that looks like a guy who's going to pull the sword out of the stone. He looks like a Hollywood superstar sort of thing, and I think that they just need to ground it a bit, but not to the point where they did with like the Clive Owen thing, where they're trying to like rewrite history with that a little bit, where it's like, no, there's still a legend, there's still kind of a mythical side to this. I feel they just need to make it feel more relatable, so people can feel similar to kind of like the Spider-Man character, and this very unlikely person gets given this kind of this responsibility and this power, and he uses it for good because of how he was brought up and the life that he's had. I really like that take on the story, and I think that they need to be going down that route. And like I said, Guy Ritchie tries to go down that route, just he tried to make it an epic, which maybe it doesn't need to be so much of this massive epic with humongous elephants and stuff like that, but also try and maybe get the casting a bit better and cast someone like, I don't know, like Tom Holland or something like that, someone who's not gonna, you look at him and think he's not gonna go lead an army, he's not gonna go kill 100 men with just one sword sort of thing. Someone you look at him and go, yeah, right, but then he pulls the sword from it, and you feel a little good feeling coming from that as a viewer, and that's what all films should do, is they should uplift you, they should make you feel good, if that's the type of film that it is, and give you a feeling of relatability to it. And that's what it needed to do, and I think that's what this King Arthur really lost, and I think that's what the story is about, to be honest. And so that's I would like to see.
Because you like the most, Andre, out of the three of us of this movie, why don't you give just final thoughts on everything?
One of the things that Ryan mentioned a little back about what he actually did enjoy about this movie is one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I don't know if Guy Ritchie got this from existing King Arthur legend, but the fact that King Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, is the stone, I thought was such a good take on the story, and it elevated the significance of Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. And so just little things like that I thought really enhanced the movie in ways that, you haven't really considered before, because, what significance did the stone have in any other iteration of the story? It didn't. But in this one, it does. It had great meaning into why the sword was where it was. And so if whoever might be listening to this podcast, if you guys haven't watched the movie, I definitely would recommend the movie, but maybe temper your expectations on what the movie's going to deliver, because it is very different. If you're not familiar with Guy Ritchie's style, it might feel a little bit jarring, because it is unique in and of itself and how the story is told, but it set up a lot of great opportunity to explore more into this legend. And even though we're not going to get more, I'm glad we got this one, because I really enjoy this movie. I think it's got a great cast, and the score is incredible. Daniel Pemberton, he's someone that you should look out for. After that movie, I know he did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was another great score. I'm pretty sure he did the score for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as well, so it does seem that Guy Ritchie and Daniel Pemberton they enjoy working together.
So, as we come to the end of the episode, if this is your first time tuning in, what I always do with a guest is have a set of questions, and this is based on the TV show Inside of the Actor Studios, because James Lipton passed early this year on March 2nd. Lipton took his inspiration from the French book talk show host Bernard Pivot, who had a similar questionnaire at the end of every episode on his show of apostrophes. However, it was not invented by Pivot, it was invented by Marcel Proust. I was a big fan of Lipton's Inside the Actor Studio, so to keep his memory alive, I thought I'd have a list similar to his at the end of each episode whenever I have a guest on. Now, I'm not going to keep the exact questionnaire that James Lipton has done, just like he did not keep the exact same questions that Pivot did, but I do want everyone to see where my guest heads at when it comes to movies. So this will be a little bit of fun. So let's get started. So because I have two guests as well, this will be a little bit different than what we normally do. Andre, I'm going to ask you 10, and then Rye, I have some for you as well. They are different from the last time you were on.
Cool.
Nice, okay.
Andre, I'll start with you. COVID aside, how often do you watch movies at the theater?
I mean, before COVID, I was maybe watching a movie maybe once a week in theaters. Now with COVID, I'm lucky to get out once a month. The fact that we're just not getting many movies, and the ones that are coming out aren't necessarily ones I want to see anyway. But movie theaters are open here in Utah, and before the pandemic, I was there quite often.
COVID aside, how often do you watch movies at home?
Ooh, probably a minimum of twice a week. I've kind of got my wife on the movie bandwagon. She enjoys movies, but she definitely didn't like movies as much as me before we got married, but she's always up to watching movies. I have to be selective to ensure that she'll sit down and watch it with me, but at least twice a week.
So who, actor or director, will make you watch a film no matter what?
So
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, it's hard to name one, but definitely Christopher Nolan, Guy Ritchie for sure. I love to say this one because it gets a reaction from everybody, but I love M. Night Shyamalan. I'll watch any movie he makes.
Do you prefer digital or hard copy movies?
Ooh, well, I'm not a purist like you, Formal. I own a lot of digital movies, but the movies that I know that are important to me, the ones that I know I want to sit down and have a really good experience, I will buy those hard copy. So I still own probably twice as many digital that I do hard copy, but I'm very selective on the hard copy ones that I do buy. But this Black Friday, and thanks to you, Formal, you notified me of the sales on the Star Wars movies. I upgraded all of my Star Wars movies to 4K. So yeah, looking forward to watching those.
Same here. So what movie-related profession would you like to attempt if you could?
Oh, either story writer or screenwriter. Those are the unsung heroes of great films. And I think kind of the trend today is, directors that want to be both. They want to be both writers and directors. And there are very few that can actually execute on that. Christopher Nolan is one of them. I think in terms of what I think about the most when I think of a good movie, it's always the story. Never say never, but it's definitely something that I would love to be able to develop. It's just the ability to write a good story.
So what is your favorite movie or movie genre?
Favorite movie genre, I would say, is sci-fi fantasy. I always find myself watching those kind of movies more than any other.
What about least favorite?
Least favorite. Does Hallmark Christmas movies count as a genre?
It does. That is a very specific genre. That definitely counts.
I'll sit down and watch some of those with my wife every now and again. But, I like rom-coms. I would say just straight romances aren't necessarily something I enjoy, but romantic comedies, I'll totally watch those. But yeah, maybe romance. Such a dude answer.
Best Batman actor?
Christian Bale.
Is it biopic or biopic?
If you asked me a few years ago, I would have said biopic, but I think it is biopic.
If heaven exists, what would you like here said to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
All right. Well, those are your questions. So, Rye, here are yours. What is your favorite movie of 2020?
That's easy, actually. Tenet.
What is your least favorite movie of 2020?
Birds of Prey.
Film-wise, what saddened you the most about 2020?
The lack of them.
Film-wise, what was the best thing about 2020?
That we had another Christopher Nolan film.
What is your favorite curse word?
Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Let's hear it, Ryan. Let's hear it.
I'm not going to say it offends quite a lot of people, so don't offend your listeners. So have you ever heard of the saying, see you next Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'll say that.
Oh, that's really funny, man. That's really funny. Basically, any Guy Ritchie movie of his older movies.
Yeah. What movie-related profession would you not want to do?
Set design. I'm not sure if that's their real name, for people that build and design sets. Not for me.
What is your favorite movie score of all time?
Are we talking the whole album, or just maybe?
Yes, one movie score.
Time from Inception is one of my favourite tracks of all time. Weirdly, all time. Sorry, mind the pun, if that is even a pun. So that's my old track. So that I have to say that. But if I was to talk about an overall score from beginning to end that I could listen to, probably have to say either The Dark Knight or Gladiator.
So then, what is your favorite movie world? So Middle Earth, a galaxy far, far away.
Oh, that's a hard one. That is a hard one. I think I'm going to have to go with Middle Earth. Not just because you just said that, but Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are my two favourite kind of world-consuming genres that are really set in a certain place.
The last question is, and take into context where this comes from. Now, do you take the blue pill where the story ends, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe? Or do you take the red pill where you stay in Wonderland and you see how deep the rabbit hole goes?
Oh... I feel like, because I'm quite a realist, I would probably...
Come on, Ryan, take the red pill.
I think I'd stay in the Matrix.
Oh.
All right, so why don't you guys tell people where they can find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yep, but as always, it's Ryan from lifeoffilms.com. Pop on by, check the website out, read some of the blogs, and get in touch if you want to have a chat.
Again, Andre Hutchins with Backseat Directors. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Just type in Backseat Directors, you'll find us. Or go to our website, and you can check out all the awesome content that Formal and the other writers are doing over there at just backseatdirectors.com.
All right, well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it, even though it was a bit of a surprise. surprise. I do appreciate both of you agreeing separately and also agreeing to continue talking even with the surprise. But yeah, thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Formal. I really enjoyed this episode. It's been good, and those questions were awesome, by the way. Very, very creative.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Formal.
Cheers, mate.
All right, guys. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
So what did you all think of the film? Let me know. Hit me up on social media. The Formal Review is on Facebook, Twitter, and the Gram. I post many things, including trailer reactions, so go check those out. The handle is all the same. It's at The Formal Review. Feel free to also check out backseatdirectors.com, where I work with a big team to put out movie reviews and also editorials. Again, that's backseatdirectors.com. Please also subscribe to The Formal Review. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're now on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. Honestly, pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, we have our content there. Also, I'm always wanting to grow and improve, so please leave a review and what you want to hear, because I really do this for you all. I see the numbers, and I really appreciate everyone supporting me and talking to me about movies, because frankly, that's what it's all about. And for anyone who has supported me on a financial basis, thank you again. And if you want to help support on a financial basis, please go to anchor.fm/the-formal-review and click support this podcast. And honestly, any donation is appreciated. Thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, wear your mask, wash your hands, stay safe, happy holidays, and take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Formal Review. Cheers, and we'll see you next time.